It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we cover your latest property news 7 days a week, as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. I hope your weekend was a good one. Well, I say a good one because it might still be continuing today. Of course, the long weekend will continue for the King's birthday in Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania and ACT, as well as the Northern Territory. Charles certainly, didn't he? He had to wait a very, very long time to get his hands on the crown. And it's around this time of the year, each year, that the Australian Republican movement advocates for change. They don't want Charles as the King of Australia. It sounds bizarre, doesn't it, to say that? Charles is the King of Australia, my dear old thing. And the primary alternative, of course, to this monarchy in Australia is a republic. And I wonder where you sit. Which way do you lean? If they decided to get rid of Charles, that would entail replacing the monarch with an Australian head of state. Would you prefer to see an Australian head of state? The idea, of course, has been a topic of discussion for decades, especially since Australia's independence from Britain. So there's a few things to think about on our Monday, and it is the 10th day for June. So let's go to Sydney, having said all of that, and catch up with Margaret Lomas from Destiny Financial Solutions. Which way on the fence do you sit? Are you a monarchist or a Republican?
Craig, I'm sure he's a very nice guy. And as you've already pointed out, he waited a very, very long time. And I wonder whether or not the Queen kind of doubted whether he would make a good king. And despite my relatively advanced age, probably compared to a lot of your listeners, I'm not a monarchist at all, and I just don't understand why we need to have the monarchy. If you think about what they contribute to Australia, and it's a different thing in England, I'm certain that there's a contribution made to England and the United Kingdom. I don't really see what kind of a contribution the monarchy makes to Australia. They have no influence. They have no decision-making power, really. I mean, they can sack the Governor-General, and that was useful a fair while ago, back in the Whitlam days. But apart from that, they don't really play a role in Australia in any way, in the economy, and I just don't understand why we would keep the monarchy. If somebody can give me some really valid points as to why we should, other than sentimental reasons, I'm all ears, but I haven't seen one, and I'm definitely not a monarchist.
I sit on that same side of the fence with you, nor am I. It's a good thing that he's the older brother, because if Prince Andrew was the older brother, my goodness me, eh? I mean, this is part of the problem.
Oh, look, it might be a bit more fun in terms of being able to watch the train wreck unfold under those circumstances. They were able to quickly dispense with him and hide him and get rid of him because of being the second brother. Much harder to hide a king if suddenly all of that comes out. So I think you're right. It's a good thing that it's not Andrew. Probably Edward would have been the best choice, really. Let's be honest. He's very quiet in the background there. Sophie's great as well. Even then, even with someone who I think would do a good job in the role, I still don't see the relevance to anything that happens here in Australia, and I just don't understand why we need to cling on to it the way we do. I think that might change, though. Give it another 10, 20 years when the monarchists, who are largely part of the older cohort, once they start to, move on to greener pastures, then we may see a new generation come through who would overwhelmingly vote for that republic if we were to hold another referendum.
I think you're right. It's actually going to go around in a full circle here, because you look at the brothers, Harry and William. I mean, that whole dynamic is interesting. But I think that when William becomes the king, that could change the dynamics completely. He's going to bring a bit more of a fresher sort of look to it. He's already showing that. And at the moment, it's just very, what do we get out of it? You're absolutely right.
And I'm not sure even under those circumstances, people in Australia and certainly the younger generation still want them to be involved in Australia in any way. I'm sure everybody likes him and thinks that he'll do a great job. That's not the point. The point is the relevance of the monarchy in everything we do in Australia. And there doesn't seem to be a compelling relevance that would make anybody think that we should continue to be brought under that monarchy.
All right, so that's our talking point for today, the 10th day of June. Now, last time we spoke, we ran out of time to have a look at the Perth property market because, that's at 20% increase. That's the way that it's going, up and up and up, more expensive than Adelaide these days.
Yes, absolutely. Now, there was a period of time where Perth was up there in amongst the most expensive capital cities in Australia. And that time was around about 15 years ago. And suddenly, after many, many years of stagnation, they had a boom that resulted in a doubling almost of prices and in some areas, a tripling of prices. And during that time, I did own property in the southern suburbs, the lowest socio-economic part of Perth, which I'd only paid $120,000 for, and it genuinely became worth $360,000 in an 18-month period. And at that time, the median value was nudging the median values of Sydney and Melbourne at the time, because both of those capital cities were going through their own extensive period of plateauing and not having a lot of growth. So suddenly then it sat there, it had that much wind in its sails that suddenly it almost smashed through the sails and the yacht bobbed about on the ocean for years and years with not only stagnating prices, but also very low relative rent returns. And so it just didn't become an attractive investment or option. And the only impetus you had for price growth were the people who lived there. Plenty of housing supply, lots and lots of land being released all of the time in both the northern and southern suburbs of Perth, and plenty more to come, meant that we saw a situation for a very long period of time when nothing happened in the property market. Well, when the rest of the country then began to boom a couple of years ago, Perth didn't at first, but then it began to boom after that, and it's really come through as a bit of a shining light. We certainly found empirically that we had a lot of investors that we helped to get into the Perth market who really have gained about $100,000 worth of equity in a very short period of time. That's great for them because it enables them to then have those deposits to leverage into more property.
And Margaret, what about those rents in Perth? Because they keep on going up.
Perth has been a real gem, but does that mean you should all be rushing in and buying Perth? I'd suggest that you might have missed that now. And because Perth does have a history of having these long periods of stagnations followed by a period of fabulous growth, it's one of those markets that you have to really time significantly if you want to be able to get something out of it as an investor.
Yeah, so plenty of growth that has happened in the Perth property market, which does lead me on to this, and that is, do you feel, in this stabilising market at the moment? Some people say that at auctions there are a few more people showing up. What's your sort of take on that?
I think that might be agents trying to talk up the market or property people trying to talk up the market. It's a funny situation at the moment because typically as we head into autumn, we see things start to slow down a little bit anyway. But if we look around the country and see the country as a whole, we are definitely seeing a significant number of markets that are just starting to see not what I would call a slowdown, but maybe a stabilisation. So what we were seeing previously was auctions had tons of people at them, even if they didn't register to bid. They were often interested people who were gauging markets, maybe looking to buy elsewhere, maybe looking to make off-auction bids after an auction was over. We saw a lot of this happening, huge, big crowds of people, great fanfare by the agents who would bring in coffee trucks and magicians and all sorts of things, particularly in Melbourne. I don't know if you've ever been to a Melbourne auction, but down there, they they really make a big event out of their auctions. So we were seeing that happening everywhere. We were seeing the situation where every time a property hit the market, basically, if you hadn't snapped that up in a couple of days, you were going to miss out. We're not seeing that happen so much now. So while properties are still selling, the length of time that they're taking to sell from listing to sales is just starting to expand out that little bit. When we see that happening, even if auction clearance rates are still reasonably strong, we then know that the market is stabilising. That doesn't mean it's going to fall. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn, but it means we need to watch it because we are definitely seeing no longer the frenzied activity that was such a feature over the last couple of years.
Yeah, interesting points about the stabilising market. We constantly talk about these first home buyers, but I want to talk with you this morning and pick up on the last home buyers and what they should be thinking about in this current market.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because nobody ever really seems to talk about last home buyers. The government has made some provision for last home buyers who are also downsizers. And we typically see couples who are in retirement or singles who are in retirement who make that decision to sell the family home for a number of reasons. Firstly, it probably holds significant equity for them that they can otherwise be using for retirement pursuits like travel and buying that caravan and doing those things that you like to do or have hoped that you could do in retirement. So that's the first reason why people change out their family home. Of course, the second reason is that many people feel that the family home may longer be suitable for their needs. So it might either be too big or it might have stairs in it that they're thinking about as they advance in years. So we see people selling that bigger family home, particularly those ones who might be in fairly expensive capital city suburbs, who can then either go to greener pastures, downsize and go to cheaper markets and realise that significant equity out of those properties. The government's recognised them in saying that what they can do is roll a lump sum of money from that last sale into superannuation, even though it's not a taxed amount of gain anyway, because it's your family home. There's no capital gains tax on whatever you make on that property, but sitting it in superannuation can give it a good taxation environment on its earnings. So 300,000 in the normal market, if it's going to earn you 10%, 30,000 a year, you'll be taxed at income tax rates. Same 300,000 in super, you're only taxed at 15%. So it's a great tax environment to roll money into. You can only do that when you sell your last home to downsize into your very final home. But what a lot of people don't think about is that it's just as hard for those people because they're often competing in similar markets to first home buyers. And even though they've got the money to move into those properties, there's competition in those markets. So it's a bit difficult for them to work out where to go and to find an area that suits them and to also compete with the numbers of people in those lower end markets. Their timing also needs to be a little bit different than a first home buyer as well. A first home buyer's timing just needs to be whenever they can do it, really, because the market is always going to be rising over time. Even when it's having a period of stagnation, you buy in a reasonably good market, it's going to grow at some time in the future.
All right, Margaret. Well, that is great to get today about those last home buyers. I know that you will be enjoying your day off with the King's birthday today. And thanks again for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Remember, we are not a real estate company. We are 100% all about increasing your awareness and knowledge for buying and selling properties. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.